Discover how a little girl's unexpected plea for help transformed a U.S. Marine and his heroic K-9. Jake Thompson stood at the edge of the local food drive, surrounded by the laughter and chatter of families. It felt surreal to him, like a scene from a film he no longer belonged to. How had he once been so at home here? The sights, the sounds, they clashed violently with echoes of gunfire and the chaos of dust and debris from his tours. The laughter he heard felt distant, tainted by his own memories. He held the food bank's flyers in his hands, the paper crinkling under the pressure of his grip. Clarity was elusive as his heart raced while he scanned the crowd, looking for something he couldn't define, something just beyond reach. Then he felt it, a tug at his sleeve. He turned to find a small girl, tears streaking her flushed cheeks, her big eyes pleading. "Mister," she murmured, voice trembling. "My puppy's gone. I think he's stuck in the old factory." A tremor ran through Jake. The factory. The whispers he'd heard, stories of shadows, the stench of abandonment, and who knows what else lurking within. A place that had stolen enough lives without him adding to the toll. Yet her innocent face sparked something inside him, igniting a flicker he had thought extinguished. A sense of responsibility. "Okay," he said, the word falling heavy from his lips. Nerves coiled in his gut, tightening as he realized they were embarking on a quest that echoed a very different kind of battle. Each step toward the factory felt like a confrontation with his own fears. Would he be enough? For her? For himself? The burden pressed down harder. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell, and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The factory loomed before them, dilapidated and groaning under its own weight. Jake's pulse quickened. How many little creaks, how many shadows would he have to navigate? Each cautious step they took seemed to press him deeper into the darkness of his own mind. There was Emily, her eyes full of determination. And yet here was Jake, battling his internal demons. What if they got lost? What if he faltered? The walls around him felt like they were closing in, suffocating, and the clatter of his thoughts became a chorus of despair. They entered, navigating through piles of debris and broken dreams. The echoes of the factory amplified his own tumultuous memories. Faces of friends long gone flashed before him. But Emily's resolve shone brightly, illuminating the crumbling path ahead. Suddenly, a loud crash cut through the tension, jerking him upright. Shadows lurked just beyond their field of vision, and Jake's protective instincts flared. Whatever weakness he had felt moments before was met with the urgency of the moment. Could he truly be the hero she needed? Or would he, like his past, let her down when it mattered most? With every creak of the factory's floor, every unsettling sound, Jake wrestled not just with the physical space around him, but with his own painful memories. The guilt, the shame, it wrapped around him. Whatever answers awaited him within this crumbling edifice, it would mean facing not just the fear for Emily, but confronting the shadows of his own existence. Would he falter? Would this time yield another loss? The factory deepened its grip, just as uncertainty held him tightly in its clutches. Jake's breath rattled in his chest as he pressed on, every step heavier than the last. Adrenaline wrestled with doubt. How could he be a protector when his own past felt so unforgiving? It had been months since he left the battlefield, yet the war within him remained unresolved, a constant reminder of how bruised he truly was. Emily reached out, gripping his hand with her small fingers as they crept deeper into the factory's maw. The air was thick with dust, swirling like the memories in his head. Scenes of comrades held and comrades lost. Heroism twisted with guilt. Each childlike squeak of the floorboards underfoot brought him back to missions where the stakes were measured in life and death. And here he was, back to the emotional landscape of fear and dread. Do you hear that? Emily's whisper broke the tense air, snapping Jake from his reverie. He focused, straining to listen. A soft whimper echoed from the shadows, mingling with the rustle of old machinery. His heart leaped as instinct kicked in. Was that the puppy? Or was it something far more dangerous? "Stay close," he murmured, channeling the calm authority he once wielded with ease. He stepped cautiously toward the sound, drawing upon the training that had never truly abandoned him. Tension coiled tight in his muscles, and every movement felt amplified against the silence. The whimper came again, a cry for help that resonated deep within his soul. Is it my puppy?" Emily's voice wavered, a quiver threading through her small body. "I think so," he replied, feeling a mix of hope and dread. They pressed deeper, navigating through remnants of a life long forgotten, shards of glass glittering like deceptive stars on the floor. As they approached a dimly lit corner, there emerged the tiny figure of a shivering puppy, caught between rusted pipes and a twisted mass of debris. Relief surged through him, momentarily overpowering the shadows that threatened to consume him. "Hold on, buddy," Jake whispered, kneeling down and reaching out slowly, careful not to startle the pup. The creature hesitated, eyes wide and brimming with fear. "I've got you." Without thinking, Jake let his intuition guide him. Tension drained from his brow. Perhaps protectiveness was something he could still master, a skill he could reclaim. He inched closer, extending a hand. It was shaky, but steady, a promise to the puppy that help was near. With a tentative paw, the puppy stepped forward, breaking the distance. A surge of something powerful coursed through Jake. Connection, purpose, a reminder of why he had fought so hard for others. It wasn't just about facing the darkness within, but also illuminating the path for someone else. "I think he knows you're here," Emily said, eyes brightening as hope flickered back into her gaze. "It's okay, little one," he urged, drawing the puppy closer. "You're safe now." The moment he felt the puppy's small frame against his palm, a surge of warmth washed over him. Within that brief contact, it felt like more than just rescuing a life. It felt like a shift, a reminder of his strength. In that fragile moment, fear melded with determination, and Jake recognized something vital stirring within him. But another crash reverberated through the shadows, an echo of unease that sent chills creeping down his spine. Suddenly darkness materialized, shifting from the corners, sensing their presence. Jake's conviction wobbled as he turned, the weight of unresolved fears crashing back. He faced the looming uncertainty, knowing this journey had transformed into more than just saving a puppy. It was a step towards confronting his own demons. And now, with shadows closing in, the question hung heavy in the air. How far was he willing to go to protect, not just Emily or the puppy, but himself as well? The crumbling factory felt like a cage, each creak and groan reverberating his internal struggles. There was only one path forward, but with danger lurking, would he find the courage to face whatever awaited them in the darkness? The echoing crash sent shockwaves through Jake's body, clenching his stomach in a knot of anxiety. Instinct drove him to reposition himself between Emily and the deepening shadows, like a shield rebuffing unseen threats. The tension in the air thickened, each breath heavier than the last as adrenaline surged. What was that? Emily's tiny voice trembled, squeezing his hand tighter. "Just stay close," Jake urged again, the protective instinct surging within him. The vulnerability of the moment reminded him more of a mission than a rescue. The familiar weight of responsibility hung over him, transforming the shivers of fear into something resolute. Jake let the instinct within him guide his scanning of the room. His eyes darted toward the darkness, searching for the source of the disturbance. Every creak of the old structure reminded him of lives at risk and split-second decisions that had hung in the balance. He was in a battleground of a different kind now, one where the stakes were no less urgent. "Let's get the puppy and go," he muttered, his voice steady. He refused to let the swirling chaos inside him seize control. Instead, he grounded himself in the mission at hand. The puppy, his trembling body a stark contrast to the overwhelming darkness surrounding them, was a beacon of hope. Jake took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs and clearing his mind. The puppy squirmed slightly as he held it close, emitting soft whimpers of discomfort. Inwardly, Jake knew this moment was a rekindling of courage. The warmth in his palm echoed the flicker of a burgeoning purpose that transcended his own fear. Suddenly the shadow stirred and a figure broke free. A man emerged, brutish and unkempt, shadow creeping around him like an aura. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as recognition seeped in, but he pushed it aside. This was a different battlefield. "Looks like you found more than just a pup," the man sneered, eyes gleaming with a chaotic energy. Jake felt the urgency of their situation pulse through him, pulling at every instinct unleashed within his warrior's training. The silence shattered, thick with tension and anticipation. This man was no friend. He was a threat, an embodiment of the danger lurking not only in the factory, but in Jake's own past. "Leave us alone." Jake's voice wavered slightly, but he stood firm, a physical barrier between the stranger and Emily. He forced his mind to reel back to the mission. He had learned how to stand tall, shield others from harm with sheer will. This wasn't going to be any different. "Or what? You'll save the girl from me?" The man's voice dripped with mockery, a challenge that pierced through Jake's composure. Something within Jake snapped into clarity. This felt like a reckoning. The fear that had paralyzed him for too long molded into a sharp blade of determination. He would not falter now, not when he had a chance to reclaim not just Emily's safety, but his own sense of value. The man stepped closer, the darkness clinging to him like a wet cloak. Jake's pulse quickened, each heartbeat roaring through him like a thunderous chant for bravery. He became acutely aware of how far he had fallen, lost in shadows of self-doubt. But as he clenched the trembling puppy against him, fury ignited in his chest. A decision loomed heavy in his mind. Would he fight back and reclaim both his identity and his courage? This moment could be the turning point. On the edge of realizing the full extent of his strength and purpose, his resolve crystallized. With a swift, calculated motion, Jake refocused his attention. Whatever haunted him, whatever pain shadowed him, he sensed that this encounter was about proving his value, not just to himself, but screaming through a silent war that had raged far too long. The moment hung in the air, electrified with tension. Confronting the man, Jake realized taking this stand was about more than protecting Emily and the puppy. It was a step towards facing the deepest parts of his own darkness. As he squared his shoulders, the shadows deepened around him. It was time to decide which path he would choose to reclaim his sense of purpose and confronting everything he had avoided for so long. Would he rise as the protector he yearned to be? Or would this moment descend back into the darkness from which he was desperately trying to escape? The tension in the room coiled tighter around Jake as he faced the stranger, who now loomed closer, a dark specter bringing shadows along with him. Every fiber in Jake's being screamed at him to act, yet there was also a strange clarity that coursed through him. Time seemed to stretch, each heartbeat echoing in the thick silence. This was not just about Emily's safety or the puppy trembling in his grasp. This was a test of everything he had become, and everything he had yet to unleash. The man's sneer widened, misjudging Jake's hesitation. "You think you can protect her? You're just a washed-up soldier playing pretend," he taunted, an eager anticipation glimmering in his wild eyes. Such words pierced Jake more deeply than he could admit. An old wound flared, revealing the scars of his past failures, yet amidst those memories, a dawning realization began to bloom. His definition of strength had shifted profoundly. Protecting Emily and the puppy was not just a physical stand, it was a reclamation of all he had lost. "Enough," Jake finally replied, his voice low but steady as steel. He could not let the man's torment seep into his core. Each syllable forged an armor around his resolve. He was not just a soldier of war but now an ally of the innocent, and that distinction made all the difference. As he stood his ground, memories of his training surged back, lessons learned in the chaos of combat, strategies tethered to the essence of survival. He thought of the bonds formed with his pack, not just the dogs beside him in the field, but the comrades who fought to protect one another. Each connection reminded him of the strength that constituted not just physical might, but also the roots of loyalty and courage. In that moment, He drew upon that reservoir of past hardships. The stranger lunged forward, quick and unpredictable. Jake sidestepped, a training maneuver ingrained in muscle memory. Instead of succumbing to panic, he embraced the rhythm of calculated response. The world around him faded, narrowing into the focused intensity of the confrontation. He felt empowered, not only through the fight, but because he was cementing his newfound identity. Seeing the raw danger in the man's approach forged a decisive spark within Jake. With a swift motion, he shifted the puppy in his arms to free a hand, readying himself. He could feel Emily watching, the weight of her gaze igniting his instincts further. He would not wilt before this threat. He would shape this encounter into a victory, both for her and for himself. "Get behind me!" he commanded, the words spilling from him like a protective shield around the girl. Instinct rallied, driven by a fierce determination that chased away vestiges of doubt. With the momentum shifting, he pushed forward. Adrenaline surged through his veins, fueling an urgency that made every sinew in his body taut and ready. The man reeled slightly but quickly recovered, swinging his arm with a reckless abandon. Just as Jake ducked to avoid the assault, he spotted a fragment of broken steel on the ground nearby, glinting dully in the low light. Without a second thought, he seized it. It was a crude weapon, but right now it felt like a lifeline. "Stay still," Jake whispered, keeping his voice low but direct as he turned back to Emily, fully aware that the shadows stirred on the boundary between triumph and failure. He had taken a step toward reclaiming what had felt lost. This was not only about saving them, but overcoming the shackles of his own past, those haunting moments that had shadowed him for too long. As he tightened his grip on the steel shard, the weight of his responsibility felt poised to tip into something transformative. Would this short-lived battle carve out the space for a renewed sense of purpose? Or would the man's chaos drag him back into shadows that threatened to overtake him? The air crackled with the unknown. Jake felt the resistance within him harden into resolve. He was ready to face whatever lay ahead and emerge from the darkness. But with the confrontation escalating, he wasn't just fighting for his life. He was about to discover how far he had come in the journey of reclaiming his own identity. The crisis was far from over, and Jake realized that while this moment held vital importance, it was only the beginning. Determination surged within him, ready to combat whatever nightmares lurked in their path. As the confrontation loomed, the greatest battle had yet to unfold. Jake's muscles coiled tightly as the man lunged, instincts taking over. The world narrowed to a prism of movement, every sound muted, except for the rush of his heartbeat roaring in his ears. He sidestepped, feeling the rush of wind as the stranger swung wildly again. This wasn't just a fight for survival, but a battlefield where he could redefine himself. A warrior not just clinging to the past, but embracing a new purpose. With the steel shard now gripped firmly in his hand, he shifted his focus. The enemy wasn't just a threat to Emily and the puppy. He represented all the chaos that had once engulfed Jake's life. Every movement he made felt like a piece of armor he was weaving around his conviction. He wasn't in this alone. Emily's unwavering gaze was a beacon, urging him onward. "Why are you doing this?" Jake questioned, breath mingling with the tension in the air as he watched the man regain his stance, a glint of madness flickering in his eyes. "There's nothing for you here." The man merely laughed, a cruel, hollow sound that scraped against Jake's resolve. "You don't get it, do you? Power is everything. You're weak, clinging to your past when you could be something more. Just let go." Jake's jaw clenched. Weakness had indeed been his shadow for too long. But in this moment, it was a flammable truth igniting in him. He had been running from it, but now he felt like he was gathering strength. Not violence, but an authentic measure of himself. There was a stark contrast between being powerful and being strong. He could be both. As they circled each other, he allowed himself a fleeting thought of his military days. Lives he was sworn to protect. Missions fought hand in hand with his brothers and sisters. All that developed a surge of unwavering loyalty and compassion within him. He grounded himself in this revelation, remembering who had stood behind him when battles raged. Then, the enemy charged again, and in one swift motion, Jake redirected his steel shard, thrusting it forward with calculated precision. He wasn't aiming for blood, but rather faced with a greater truth. the need to incapacitate the threat without crossing the line into senseless violence. That brink was part of his growth, a lesson forged through the fires of personal struggle. The man stumbled, miscalculating the energy of Jake's counterattack. Jake felt a rush of triumph. This was not merely physical prowess, but mastery over his fear. With the glint of determination in his eyes, he closed the distance, ready to press his advantage. "Emily, stay back," Jake cautioned as he advanced, his voice steady. Not just a command, but a reassured promise that he would protect her. His gaze stayed locked on the figure in front of him, eyes moving with grave intensity. In this moment of clarity, he sensed an emotional shift, the familiar knots of panic and self-doubt loosening their grip. But as the confrontation rattled forward, he couldn't ignore the chill creeping over him. The man, now momentarily disoriented, grinned through bloodied teeth, revealing a darkness that unsettled Jake. He realized he had stepped into the ring, not just as a protector or warrior, but as a man prepared to confront his very essence. "Do you think this changes anything?" The stranger spat, struggling to regain composure. "You're just prolonging the inevitable." Jake took a breath. "No, it changes everything." The confrontation shifted again, each man tethered not just to the fight but to the deeper revelations awaiting them. For Jake, every evasive maneuver and every jab was revealing parts of himself he had pushed aside for too long. Then suddenly, he heard a muffled whimper from the puppy clutched tight in Emily's arms, instinctively snapping Jake's attention. He was losing sight of what mattered under this sudden surge of aggression. This battle wasn't merely for dominance. It was a rehearsal for reclaiming all he intended to protect. With renewed purpose, Jake tightened his grip on the shard, readying himself for the unfolding fight, while holding on to the truth that defined him. This time, the stakes were more than his life. They were about the possibility of genuine transformation. As the darkness threatened to swallow the room, Jake prepared to face deeper truths within himself, both a soldier and a man wrapped inside the impending storm. But just as the confrontation reached its zenith, an unexpected sound echoed through the tension-choked air, changing the objectives entirely. A voice cried out from somewhere beyond the chaos, ushering in the realization that Jake had another battle ahead. This one would test not just his strength, but the very fiber of his newly reclaimed identity. Jake's mind raced, the voice cutting through the tension like a knife. It wasn't just a cry, it was a plea, raw and desperate, reaching into the depths of his composure. Every instinct screamed at him to forge ahead and eliminate the threat before him, but instead, a new weight collided with his resolve, pulling him toward the source of the call. "Stay close, Emily," he barked, eyes darting to where the sound had emerged. He could see her confusion mixed with fear, the puppy trembling in her arms. Clarity struck. This wasn't just about combating the man who had invaded their sanctuary. It was spiraling into something far more complex, an evolving conflict that mirrored the turbulence within Jake himself. He strained his ears, trying to discern the origin of the voice. The urgency of it compounded his internal struggle. Protectors were not just warriors, but also places of refuge. Would his actions reflect the virtues he had learned in service, or would he revert to the violence ingrained in his past? With each moment, he felt the alignment within himself shifting. The stakes were raising rapidly. "Let's find out where that came from," he murmured, his voice firm yet filled with an unfamiliar softness, a layering of new intentions. He started moving toward the sound, his instincts now marrying compassion with vigilante resolve. "Jake!" Emily shouted, her voice laced with alarm. What if he gets a chance to hurt us?" Jake responded rapidly but calmly, seeking to reassure her. "Let me handle it. I won't let anything happen to you or the pup." Each step he took towards the darkness echoed with the gravity of being unmoored. He was not merely facing the man with the wild eyes anymore. He was headlong into a confrontation with his past, confronting the pieces he had fought so hard to suppress. Each shadow seemed to whisper of his missteps, driving home the notion that the journey wasn't about brute force, but rather the integration of his darker experiences alongside his new, emerging self. Then, as he turned a corner, his heart sank at what he saw. A little girl, barely 5, cowered behind some debris, her eyes wide with terror. Everything froze. The man he fought barely registered as Jake knelt low, breaking the instinctual cycle of battle. Hey, it's okay, Jake called softly, extending a hand. It was a stark contrast to the threat he'd just faced. The innocence in her eyes stirred something deep within him. This wasn't just about physical demons. This was about saving another soul from the nightmares he knew all too well. Stay behind me, just for a moment, he instructed Emily, urgency now mixed with protective determination. His focus shifted from the adversary to the girl, and he felt the pulsing undercurrent of purpose crowding in his chest. She needed him. This was the calling he'd feared he could never answer. A mission that demanded every ounce of his newly forged identity. The tension had shifted completely, relocating focus from survival against brutality to nurturing innocence over chaos. That murky darkness around him didn't dissolve, but instead, it transformed. An external force now holding a mirror reflecting his internal battle for understanding and strength. The man sneered, sensing weakness, but Jake stood steady, that unfamiliar sense of protective love igniting a fire in his belly. Let her go, he said, the command firm but compassionate. She's not a part of this fight. The air hung stale with incredulity. Time slowed. More than a fight for his life, this was about the essence of who he was becoming. And the rekindled warrior within him no longer saw power as dominance, but as stewardship of vulnerability. With the little girl now the epicenter of his attention, Jake felt the certainty of his next move coiling like a spring in his spirit. He had risen from the ashes of doubt. Now, he would embrace the chaos and carve a path not only for himself, but for the innocent souls that stoked his bravery. But a flicker of movement from the man caught Jake's attention. It was a final act of desperation. A wicked grin marred the face of his opponent as Jake realized that the battle was only beginning. As the man lunged toward the girl instead, something primal surged inside Jake, reawakening an ancient instinct. The moment had come to face everything that had shaped him. In an instant, the world around Jake narrowed to a pinpoint focus, the chaotic noise fading to a dull hum as adrenaline surged through his veins. The roar of his heartbeat drowned out all but the vision of the little girl, trembling with fear, trapped between the wreckage of their surroundings and the man who sought to harm her. In that electrifying moment, Jake felt the clarity of purpose solidifying within him, channeling the skills he had long honed into a singular resolve. His years of training screamed at him to assess the tactical response. Yet here, with this innocent child at the center of the chaos, he realized tactics alone wouldn't protect her. It was compassion that would fortify him against the depths of violence, gently shaping the warrior within into a protector. Jake's body moved before his mind fully comprehended it. With rapid strides, he intercepted the man's rush, his heart pounding in rhythm with his every calculated motion. "Get back," he barked at the man, a fierce urgency driving his words. He felt the weight of authority in his tone, yet underneath it lay an emerging vulnerability, a willingness to shield, not just fight. The man's eyes gleamed with madness, laughing at what he perceived as Jake's hesitation. "You think you can protect her? You're just a coward playing hero," he spat, a mixture of disdain and derision coloring his voice. Jake struggled internally with that label. Coward. It pierced deeper than any physical confrontation. He'd spent years wrestling with that very identity after leaving the Marine Corps, grappling with the repercussions of choices that weren't always clear. But the piercing gaze of the little girl stirred something undeniable. That question, coward or warrior, was irrelevant now. What mattered was his action in this pivotal moment. "Cowards don't fight for the innocents," Jake responded, finding strength in the taunt. As he spoke, the clarity of his intentions sharpened. He was not just defending her, but embracing the essence of who he wanted to become. This confrontation transcended mere physicality. It became a reckoning of belief, morality, and the values he wished to embody. "Jake," Emily's voice broke through, a reminder of her presence and a tether to his broader purpose. She was witnessing his transformation, bearing witness to where one man's shadow could light a path toward hope and healing. With newfound clarity, Jake glanced at Emily, then back at the man, whose madness only grew. As the man lunged again, this time Jake pivoted with agility, a move he had practiced countless times throughout his career. His fist connected sharply with the man's jaw, a burst of energy that grounded him. Yet he didn't follow it with more violence. Rather, he sought a control that redirected. "Enough!" he shouted, feet planted firmly. This was not just a conflict of bodies, but of wrestling the fears within. Strained and heaving, Jake felt the volatile mix of anger and pain rehearsed throughout his life crystallizing into focus. It was the instinct to protect, now taking a rightful form, guiding him away from destruction toward resolution. As the adversary stumbled back, caught off guard, Jake seized the opportunity to further shield the girl. He shifted his gaze back down at her, positioning his body so she was nestled safely behind him. "You're safe," he whispered, and for once, he felt the true meaning of that phrase swell within him. The growl of the man returned, a fierce challenge escaping through clenched teeth. "You're gonna regret this." Jake straightened, realizing that despite taking a stand for this innocent life, the battle was escalating. What had begun as a desperate attempt to prove worth, to redefine his identity, was evolving into a fierce fray that required not just physical prowess, but mental acuity. The man's aggression elicited a duality within Jake, to persist in his new role as protector while wrestling with the remnants of his past. The girl behind him clutched at his pant leg, seeking comfort and courage in the midst of chaos. And in that moment, Jake discovered something vital. Strength wasn't just about fighting. It was about becoming a shield for those unable to protect themselves. But as he prepared for the next inevitable clash, he felt that shadow of danger creeping again. His opponent was far from defeated, and Jake was cognizant that each second counted. The next move could either shatter his resolve or ignite a fire that wouldn't be snuffed out. The chaos around him grew heavier, and he took a deep breath, readying himself, knowing that his moment of truth loomed ahead, a revelation that challenged who he truly was meant to be. The roar of his inner conflict surged, begging him to confront the remnants of pain, and in doing so, Jake was reminded that the outcome of this fight wasn't solely about survival, but about transformation. The man lunged again, and Jake braced for impact, knowing the decisions made here would define the warrior he was destined to become. Jake sensed the momentum shift as the man lunged, a primal instinct triggering every nerve in his body. He had trained for moments like this, but nothing prepared him for the urgency of the little girl's safety. As he dodged the strike, memories of his training surged through his mind. But it was a different kind of training that was surfacing now, one rooted in vulnerability, empathy, and the sincerity of purpose. With a quick sidestep, Jake evaded the assault and countered with a sharp jab to the man's midsection. The impact resonated through his fist, yet he felt it. This wasn't just a fight against another man. He was grappling with a version of himself that had always hung in the shadows, the man who had feared becoming the monster he had witnessed during his military service. "Damn you!" the assailant spat, doubling over but refusing to back down, eyes wild and filled with desperation. The raw anger emanating from him was entangled with deeper issues, a reflection of a life steeped in chaos, much like Jake's own past. Yet, as Jake gazed into those frantic eyes, he recognized an opportunity. Here was a chance to redefine conflict, not to perpetuate violence, but to disrupt it. "Stop this!" Jake yelled, the plea escaping before he could fully process it. "You're not the villain you think you are." He remembered his own struggles, how at times he felt overwhelmed by the darkness that loomed within. Perhaps this man suffered a similar torment. The violent energy crackled between them, a storm of choices that would either lead to devastation or unexpected understanding. Jake's heartbeat steadied, the wisdom of his experiences weaving into his approach. This wasn't simply about skill. It was about connection. "Help me to understand," he pressed. "What made you this way?" The words tumbled from his mouth, a fusion of inquiry and resolve. The man faltered, confusion flickering across his features. For a moment, the madness receded, revealing a glimmer of humanity buried beneath layers of hurt and anger. "It's too late for me," he growled, a bitter truth laced with disbelief. But Jake felt the fissures of that belief growing. Fear and anger blinded people more thoroughly than any weapon. If he could shift that perspective, perhaps he could shift the outcome. "Nothing is too late," Jake insisted, feeling the protective instinct ignite within him again. This was not just about shielding the girl, it was about bridging a gap. He was committed to refusing the cycle of violence that haunted them both. The girl nestled behind him inched closer, sensing Jake's determination. Jake's body tensed as he anticipated another strike, but instead he chose to lower his fists, standing firm yet open. "I've seen pain, and I've borne the scars. We can help each other break these chains." The man stopped in his tracks, wrestling visibly with the choice to continue attacking or to turn toward the truth Jake was offering. The transformation hung in the air like thick fog, a moment pregnant with possibility. Just then, a piercing wail from the girl shattered the moment of tension. "Don't hurt him," she cried, her innocent voice breaking through like a beacon. Her plea reverberated through Jake, and a realization dawned. Her heart was as brave as any soldier's, essential to weaving the fabric of courage he sought to embody. "Please," she continued, her tiny voice shaking. "He's scared. Just talk to him." The unrelenting sincerity in her words carved through the lingering hostility, inviting a space for healing rather than destruction. Jake turned, giving her a quick nod, feeling pride swell within him. She had sparked an idea, one that would redefine his role. The essence of this fight had shifted again. It was no longer solely about survival or proving himself as a warrior. It was a chance to initiate a dialogue, to confront not just a man bent on violence but also an opportunity to confront himself. In an instant, Jake realized that this was not merely the moment for action, it was a moment for choice, both for himself and the man before him. Would the reopening of their hearts lead to further conflict, or a metamorphosis? As the man hesitated, scanning Jake's face for any sign of weakness or deception, the tension hung palpably. Jake felt a flicker of hope alongside the fear that this peaceful resolution could still crumble into chaos. Everything they both endured flashed through his mind, but the decision rested on the precipice of time. An unforeseen bridge of empathy stretched between them. In the stillness, Jake prepared for the possibility of an unexpected turn, knowing that whatever happened next would be as pivotal as the fight that preceded it. Would this be a true awakening for both, or would the darkness close in again, suffocating the chance for redemption? The next move lay suspended, ripe with uncertainty, fueling the urgency for a resolution he hadn't yet grasped. And within that pause he sensed the next confrontation brewing, not just with the man, but with his own internal demons, marking the true battle that loomed just beyond the horizon. The weight of tension in the air was palpable as Jake awaited the outcome of his gamble. He had opened a door to understanding, but whether it would lead to something transformative or catastrophic remained uncertain. His instincts warred with his newfound approach. Each second that stretched felt like a minute, and in that suspended moment, doubt seeped into his mind. What if he had misread the man completely? What if his vulnerability was seen as weakness? The delicate balance he sought to maintain felt fragile, like glass resting on a single point. The little girl's plea echoed in his ears, a reminder that his choices did not just impact himself, but also those around him. As the man shifted, knife still daggered and ready in his grip, Jake took a deep breath. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. The question hung in the air, a lifeline thrown into an ocean of encroaching violence. For the first time the man hesitated, his grip on the weapon faltering as feral determination softened to a hint of reasoning. I just wanted to be seen," the man finally admitted, shaking now as the remnants of aggression battled against emotional truth. "This world has left me behind." Jake's mind raced at the significance of this admission. It was a fracture in the armor, a glimpse of the vulnerability he recognized in his own journey. He understood that being seen was something he longed for as well during his tumultuous past, a yearning shaped by solitude and struggle. "I understand. I've been there," he said, his heart pounding as he leaned into the breach, his own scars acting as a bridge. "You think anyone cares?" the man scoffed, the shadows of despair clawing back to the surface. "Try being invisible." "Then let's change that," Jake urged, feeling a fire ignite within him. "You can be seen. I can be seen. Let me help you find a different path. You don't have to be alone." The desperation in the man's eyes began to soften, confusion wrestling with the instinct to lash out. Jake sensed the pivotal nature of this moment. This was not merely a confrontation, but an invitation to rephrase the narrative of their lives. The little girl edged her way into the scene once more, her small hand clutching Jake's arm. "You don't have to fight," she said again, her gaze full of hope and compassion that belied her innocence. "We can talk. Please. It's better than hurting." In that instant, everything shifted. Jake witnessed a spark of recognition cross the man's face, like a slow dawn breaking through a stormy night. This was no longer about defeating an enemy. It was about reclaiming lost humanity. As the knife slowly lowered, Jake felt not just relief, but an exhilarating rush of resolve pulse through him. The man's vulnerability revealed a much deeper connection, one that Jake had not anticipated. "How?" he asked, the fury ebbing away. "How can I be helped?" Jake stepped closer, embodying the sincerity he had found in himself. "First, let go of the anger. Then we will find a way to heal. I promise you, it's possible." As the man considered this, Jake recognized the defining moment of his life. The fight he thought was meant for survival had morphed into an unexpected opportunity for growth and connection. This confrontation was no longer about erasing a shadow, but uncovering the light within, both for him and the man before him. But just as understanding began to take root, sirens rang in the distance, cutting through the fragile tension like a knife. The loud wails drew near, reminding Jake that this moment of potential realization was fleeting. The external world was rushing in, threatening to derail their journey toward healing. Staring into the man's searching eyes, Jake realized the impending choices held weight. One path led to involution, the other to enlightenment. Would he step back into violence as fear swallowed them again, or continue down this new path toward transformation? The sirens grew louder, an urgency rising inside him. The fragile bridge they had begun to construct threatened to collapse under the weight of time. The next steps loomed heavy, calling for a decision that would echo in his future, one that could either shatter their tentative bonds or forge an unbreakable alliance against their shared darkness. Jake inhaled sharply, the tumult of the moment rushing forth as he knew he had to decide swiftly. Could he empower this estranged soul to find a chance for redemption? The choice was near, as the sirens screamed towards their reality, and in his heart, the truth began to crystallize. Healing lay not in conflict, but in courage and connection. Would he and the man overcome the spiraling chaos, or would the cacophony of sirens usher them back into the depths of despair? The pivotal moment of truth awaited. Jake stood at the precipice of a new understanding, the cacophony of the outside world melding with the pulse of an unexpected connection that hummed in the air between him and the man who had threatened him. The blaring sirens marked the arrival of outside aid, an assurance that help was on the way, yet in that moment it also symbolized a looming choice: to bridge the divide or to surrender to chaos. "Listen," Jake urged, his voice steady as he shifted his focus back to the man. "You don't have to be alone in this. I see that you're hurting, but continuing down this path only leads you deeper into darkness." The man's posture wavered, straining against the resolve that kept him teetering on the brink of violence. Everything Jake had fought against within himself bubbled to the surface, matching the desperation in the man's eyes with compassion instead of fear. "Whatever you've done, it doesn't mean you're beyond help. Together we can find another way." Silence enveloped them, thick and tense, as the weight of Jake's words hung between them. A glint of uncertainty crossed the man's face, battling against years of hurt and anger. In that fragile moment, Jake reached deep inside, feeling the resolve to reclaim both their lives. His own path forged through countless battles now stretched before him, becoming a bridging spectrum of healing. "Let's take that step together," Jake said, inching closer, his heart racing with clarity. The invitation was as much for himself as it was for the stranger before him. "You don't have to be the villain. You can redefine your story just like I am." As the sirens rang closer still, it seemed the world around them paused, urging a shift in perspective where healing could surpass temporary solutions. The man hesitated, the knife lowering in his grip. In those eyes, Jake could now see the flicker of a shared humanity, the potential for transformation glimmering amidst the shadows that had long dominated their lives. "Do you want that?" Jake asked, pushing gently, allowing the truth of his own struggles to spill forth. "Do you want to fight back against the pain, or do you want to let it consume you?" You have a choice." In the fracturing silence, Jake turned to Emily, who stood bravely behind him, her small hand still gripping his arm. The innocence in her eyes sparked something within him. Here was the embodiment of courage and unyielding faith. She believed fully in all that could still be salvaged. It inspired Jake to lean into the moment, to help the man find a footing in a tumultuous sea of emotion. The sirens grew louder still, commanding attention that would not wait long. "If you choose to walk this path with me, know that there's help coming." Jake gestured behind himself, indicating the approaching sirens. "In this moment, you have the chance to embrace healing instead of resistance." An inner battle raged within the man. Jake could see it warring behind the bravado, the cycle of violence twisting back on itself, calling for redemption more than brutality. Slowly, the grip on his weapon loosened, dropping to the ground with a clank that echoed like thunder, settling into the dust-covered floor. "I don't know if I deserve help," the man finally said, his voice gasping under the weight of vulnerability. "You do deserve help. We all do," Jake reassured, emboldened by the shift. "You just have to be willing to step into the unknown. I promise I'll be right here to guide you through it." Jake felt the seismic shift as the man's defenses crumbled. Clarity began to break through the storm that had long overshadowed their lives. The sirens rode in on new energy, the promise that this moment marked a transition. As they stood at the intersection between confrontation and connection, Jake felt it, a sweeping wave of personal transformation coursing through him. Leaving his fears at the factory door, he stepped into the light of possibility, channeling the discoveries from a journey marred by chaos into an emerging landscape of hope. "See?" Jake said gently. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" The words hung between them, a crystalline assertion that the battle to reclaim one's humanity held greater value than the scars of the past. The man's breath shook, filled with uncertainty, but edged with new resolve. Maybe it's not too late after all. In that moment, a significant truth crystallized. Jake was not just the soldier who felt wholly lost. He was now emerging as a warrior of connection and understanding. The factory had transformed within its walls the echoes of despair into notes of healing, each breath pressing them toward a new shared responsibility. Not long after, as the sirens silenced in the distance, Jake saw guidance and hope reflected in the eyes of both the man and Emily. He had faced not just the shadows lurking within the factory, but the darkness of his very soul. Years from now, look back on this day echoed in the soft light of understanding. Jake was not just a protector. He had learned to embrace the complexities of humanity, its fears, insecurities, and desires for connection. With renewed purpose, Jake stepped forward into a bright tomorrow, knowing that he had conquered not just the man before him, but the battles that had long raged within. With the warmth of a new horizon, he grasped both their hands, a vow to rewrite their stories toward something powerful, profound, and filled with promise. As they walked together, Jake felt the swell of progress anchor him firmly in his newfound reality, his mind reflecting on what had transpired. It was not merely a victory, a superficial notion of success, but rather an evolution shaped by courage, choice, and the courage to connect amidst chaos. This was the moment of truth, both for Jake and for the man who stood beside him, the dawning of a life no longer defined by loss, but rebirth. It was a victory carved from the ashes of their failures, marking the beginning of a journey toward healing. Now is the time for you to act. Dive deeper into this transformative journey. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support matters. Comment below your reactions and theories about this powerful ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness the strength of personal overcoming. Together, let's spread hope and inspiration far and wide.